Hello and welcome to On Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I answer some of your questions. And today we have got questions about all kinds of things. I am wearing my Spark Cardi. We are getting hit with a mega snowstorm right now. So there is quite a few inches on the ground out there, and then apparently it's going to hop back up to like the high 50s on Monday, I think. So we are hunkered down, staying warm, and let's chat. Let's get into some questions. I'm just gonna move my 10 million swatches I have right here in front of me. Move to that little corner. All right, move my knitting needles, and I am ready. So, oh yes, so Spark Cardi, this is an oldie but a goodie. This was from the Rhinebeck. That did not happen back in 2020. It was supposed to be the Rhinebeck sweater, and it uses Spin Cycle Yarns Dream State, and it uses Magpie Fibers Nest. I was just making sure it wasn't domestic worsted. It isn't, it's Nest. And it is, you know what? A delight on a chilly, chilly day like this. Okay, let's get into some questions. So, first question. Oh my goodness. I cannot believe this. All of a sudden, all of y'all had issues with pills. I had so many questions about pills. So, we have got some pilly sweaters that we need to deal with. And we also are going to talk a little bit. Why do our sweaters... I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of a hot mess today. The good news is I got through my intense design week last week. Still have to write the pattern, but I've started and I'm feeling pretty good. So anyways, let's talk pills. And I picked, there was at least 3. Like, why is this on my desk? My son likes to sometimes like put random toys on my stuff, and he's like, it's for you, keep you company. Okay, pills, Andrea, pills. So here we go. First one, this is from somebody who left their old career, which was working in kitchens, to now they have a desk job, so they get to wear their hand-knit sweaters more often, which they're super stoked about, but they're really struggling with them getting pilly a lot. Is there anything I can do to prevent it from getting worse or happening to new knits? And the other person who wrote in had knit a Weekender Light, and in the yarn they chose, it's also pilling a ton. They're wondering if they can just keep using their Gleener. They feel like they have to de-pill it with almost every wear. And the third one, is there anything I can do to prevent pilling on my sweaters? Finished a sweater over the weekend and wore it to work on Monday. Wasn't being super active, but by the end of the day, I already had pills on the inner arms. Is there a good way to prevent that? Are there certain fibers which resist pilling? The only pattern I've noticed is maybe the softer yarns are more prone to pills. So anyways, there's a little kind of roundup of those 3 questions. So let's first start off with kind of where we landed there with that last knitter who noticed one common denominator seemed to be that the softer yarns were more prone to pills, and that is very, very true. So in general, what makes a yarn soft? One of the factors is micron count and length, staple length. So how long that fiber was when it came off of the animal. So those 2 things are gonna often play a very big role in how soft your yarn is. Generally speaking, the shorter the staple length and the lower the micron count, the softer the yarn. Those little short staple lengths, hello cashmere. Cashmere has a really short staple length. The quicker it pills. The longer the staple length tends to be the coarser the fiber will end up being once it's spun into a yarn. But because those fibers are nice and long, they stay twisted in the yarn better. They don't work their way out quite as easy and get knotted up and create little pills. So that's kind of why we're seeing pills, is over time, the fibers that had been twisted into a yarn wiggle their way out and play with other fibers and create little balls on our sweater. Like I've got one right here. Creates these lovely, lovely little fuzz bunnies that we have to deal with. So the softer the yarn, the more likely it's going to happen. So words that you might see on a yarn label or when you're looking around for yarn would be like super fine, would be kind of like that one might pill, anything with cashmere. So you kind of have to pick what's most important to you. Are you like, I only want baby soft yarns? Then you're probably going to deal with more pilling. So that's just kind of a trade-off. So that is step one, is thinking about your yarn. What yarn you're picking is going to determine a lot of times how quickly, like that's what I think of as the main factor on how quickly something is going to pill. Number two is going to be how it's knit. So there are times when we might want a really drapey fabric out of the yarn that actually, you know what? I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna go back a step. So we already talked about how soft the yarn is, how that plays a role. But now let's talk about how the yarn's made. So the structure of that yarn. Is it a single ply yarn, meaning it's just one strand of yarn? Or is it a plied yarn, which means 2, 3, 4 or more strands of that yarn have been twisted around itself to create the yarn? So that's going to play a role in how easy it is for those little fibers to wiggle their way out and create pills. Single ply yarn is going to pill more than a sock yarn that's got 4 plies. And how much twist is in it. If you are looking at different plied yarns and you kind of like, have you ever done that where you untwist like this so you can see how many plies are in the yarn? You can kind of see how tightly is that yarn twisted. The tighter the twist, usually the stronger it's going to be. But that again affects softness. So sometimes we might see a yarn that feels really soft. Pay attention, look and see. Like I have one on my desk right now that has a really, really loose ply. Let me see. And it's very soft. Let me see if I can kind of show it to you. Do you see that? So do you see how open that twist is? That is a really loosely plied yarn, which is going to create a soft yarn, but it's also not going to have quite the integrity of a yarn that had, do you see how much, like a lot of yarns are going to have closer to like that much twist. Now to show you again how loose, let me pull one that I didn't just twist. I would love to hold it up next to a more, aha. I think this is actually, is this my leftovers? What's it doing up there? I always keep my leftover cakes for swatching, but I'm pretty sure. Okay. Oh, by the way, sidebar, I am drinking the most lovely tea right now. Today's the day. I'm on cup number 2 of tea, different tea, but tea all the same. And this one is lovely from my friend New from Hide and Hammer. If you're ever looking for a good project bag, I love Hide and Hammer. And she snuck some tea into my last order, and man, it was loose tea. And she does 2 parts of English breakfast to 1 part Earl Grey, and it is a delight. I am really enjoying it. Okay, I've got 2 examples ready. Thank you for listening to my tea chat. We're getting back to plies and pills. Okay, so look at, do you see how different the twist is on those? We got loosey-goosey right here, and then we got tight and tidy right here. This tight and tidy is going to hold up better over time than my loosey-goosey. This one might create a denser, stiffer fabric, depending on how you work it, depending on what you make out of it, where this one already is going to just be a little, like you can even kind of see in the way that bends compared to like, I can't even get that one to, you know, it's just gonna flop right over. So how soft is your yarn? How is it structured? Now let's talk about how we knit it. When we knit it, If it is knit, some designers love to go up a whole bunch of needle sizes and knit their stuff at a really loose gauge, or some designs need a lot of drape, so they're going to be knit at a looser gauge because we want it to be all flowy like a shawl. But the looser the gauge, the less integrity. And I don't want that to come off as like a negative thing. It's just information to help us know how to care for our knits and to know what's its life expectancy. So if we really want something that is going to be able to go through the ringer and be super hard wearing and is going to last through generations, we probably do want to knit it with not a crazy soft yarn, one that has some plies and a decent twist on it, and one that, and I'm going to knit it with a gauge that's going to give it a little bit, it's going to boost its integrity. But if I'm knitting maybe just a lovely shawl, you know, it can go the other way where you're like, well, I'm not so worried about this becoming an heirloom. I really love this yarn. I love how soft it is. I love to wrap up in it. And I understand that it might pill a bit more. It might not last as long down the road. That doesn't mean it won't still last for years and years and years and years and years. So I just don't want there to be any negative connotation with one group or the other. So when we knit something, what is so cool, like if you've ever tried an unspun yarn, like a Let Lopi or anything like that, they can just drift apart. Like you can just pull those yarns apart. But as you knit it, you strengthen it. And I just love that. I love that whole concept. So all yarns are like that. As we knit them, we help add structure to them, which is going to help them hold together more. When we knit them at a denser gauge, so think about socks. Like we're always going to knit socks at a pretty darn tight gauge, and that helps strengthen our socks. We don't need to knit, you know, because they're on our feet, they are getting the most abrasion. We don't need to knit a shawl at such a tight gauge, because it's just not having as hard of a life as our socks are going to get as we walk around in our shoes. So how tight, how dense you are knitting your gauge is also going to play a role in how that yarn lasts over time and how much it pills. Whew. That was a whole lot. I mean, I'm like halfway through the episode time here and I'm still talking about question number 1. So I hope you all really wanted to deep dive into a little TED Talk about pills, because this is what we're doing. Okay, so we've talked about all the reasons why things pill, what we can think about as we're choosing yarns, choosing gauge, that kind of thing as we move along in our projects. Now let's talk about the after effect. Okay, we've knit the thing. I love soft yarns. I'm going to use the soft yarns. I got to deal with the pills. One, you can just not care and you can walk around with pills on your sweater. You do you. But if it's driving you bonkers, you're going to need to get them off of there. My favorite tool that I tend to use is my Gleener. I got it a decade ago. It's still going strong. It's really easy to use. There are a whole bunch of different options out there. There are little things that need batteries that shave your sweater. Coco Knits has a cool one that looks like a straight razor that you can depill with. I've used that one. I like that one. There are just all kinds of things out there. So you're going to need a tool, a way to remove those pills. One thing that's probably not really suggested is to sit there and tear the pills off your sweater, because then you're pulling out even more little, for lack of a better word, hairs of that fiber, and they're just going to keep creating more pills. So don't just tear them off. Like, I would use a tool. Now, one of the fears is, and I even did a little research, because I think one of our fears is, well, can I depill too much? And yes, someday there may be a hole where you've had to depill that sweater a whole bunch, because what's happening is every time those pills are created and then we remove them, is we're removing part of the sweater. You know, it's that's what's happening. But it's already formed a pill anyway. Like, there's no leaving it on there is not keeping the sweater more intact. So I guess what I'm trying to say is removing the pills isn't breaking down the sweater any faster. It's just that the pills are going to be created. It's just part of it. And as far as anything you can do to avoid it outside of paying attention to the things we've already talked about, it would really just be care. So if you are somebody who's maybe using superwash yarns and you're throwing that sweater in the washer, maybe switch to hand washing. The more gentle you can be, because it is abrasion and that movement, that's why we see, like, this is usually the hot spot for pills, is right in this area where we're rubbing all day long, because that is what's creating that, all those little fibers that stick out, any little halo, that's how they can kind of grab onto each other and start to form those little balls. So how we wash our sweaters is going to add, that's a whole other time where they can have that abrasion happen. So I would definitely recommend with hand washing your sweaters if you're not already, and that should hopefully help with that. But it is part of that sweater life. I mean, honestly, so much clothing, I see it on all kinds of fabric, even like leggings and stuff like that. I'll notice all these pills. So it's a part of life. But I hope that long answer was helpful. So, whew. All right. Should I just count that as 3 questions? No, I won't, but I'll try not to be quite so long-winded with the rest. All right. I'm planning to knit the bean and olive sweater for my 3 granddaughters. That's so sweet. However, they prefer cardigans to pullovers. I have never steeked a sweater, and the thought is a bit terrifying, but I've convinced myself to take the plunge. Do you have any suggestions on the best way to go about steeking this pattern, or would it be best to try and convince them that pullovers are the way to go? Okay, well, the good news is you could always start with one, and then maybe you only have to talk 2 of them into pullovers if it was just too stressful. But I think you can do it. So here are my tips. 1 is practice on a swatch first. Knit a swatch in the round and steek that. That's going to help boost your confidence and make you feel comfortable. I would also do it over, like I would knit a swatch in the round of the color work in the bean and olive sweater and play around with where you want to place that steek line. So that's going to help you work out things you might not think about until after the fact by doing it in the swatch with the actual stitch pattern in there. Because here's what you might want to think about. I'm wearing a steeked sweater right now. Let me actually show you the base of it. Okay, so right here, do you see how I have these lined up so that it's the same on both sides? Now, if I wasn't paying attention and the sweater wasn't meant to be steeked, I might have ended up like, kind of like this and been like, oops, they don't actually match. So because you are choosing a sweater that is not written for steeking, you're going to have to add in a steek column. I would do 5 to 7 stitches in there, and you're just going to do either a striped pattern over those 7 columns, or you can do a checkerboard, whatever you prefer. But you might want to pay attention to where you're putting that within the stitch pattern around the yoke, because you might want to try and get it so it feels like it's right in the middle, so that the sides line up and look the same. But here's the thing. You're knitting these for your granddaughters. They're never going to notice the difference. To be honest, so many times when I go see ready-to-wear sweaters at a store, I will notice that they're not perfectly lined up. So don't sweat it. You're also going to end up adding a button band. So the button band is going to distract from if it's not perfectly lined up. So don't sweat it, but it's something you could think about ahead of time that you might want to plan for. And besides that, I've said it before, but I'll say it again because I think it helps when we're feeling nervous about steeking. Our knits don't generally want to unravel horizontally. Those stitches want to drop down, not to the side. So if that helps reduce your stress at all, it's not going to want to unravel in that direction. It's going to be fine. Depending on the yarns you're using, you can either do a crochet reinforcement before steeking, or you can do a sewn reinforcement using a sewing machine if you have access to one. That is a really great option if you're using a superwash yarn. And for kids' sweaters, I kind of like using the sewn reinforcement because they're probably going to be a little rougher with their cardigans than maybe an adult would be. And that sewn one is just really nice and strong. So is the crochet one, but it's a nice option. If you choose to do the sewn one, you can look it up. There are so many tutorials all over the interwebs. So you'll definitely find one out there, but I just like to do a zigzag stitch, and I usually go over it twice just to really lock her in. And then my last tip is to actually go through and pick up the button band before you cut. So go ahead and reinforce where you're gonna do your steeking, and then pick up your button band, knit the button band on both sides, and then cut it open. And the reason I love to do that is because when we are picking up and knitting stitches for a button band, we're tugging on that area a lot, which can be a little nerve-wracking after you've cut something open. So by doing it beforehand, you're putting the stress on that area before you ever cut it open, so you don't even have to, once you cut it open, it's already solid and good to go. So there you go. There's my favorite tips for doing that, but you'll be great. If you want to try it, I think you'll have great success. Okay. Da, 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 da. This one has nothing to do with knitting. Okay, sourdough bread has made its comeback, and I'm curious, with your background in baking, if you have any thoughts on sourdough bread baking at home. I understand you have gut health issues, so maybe bread is not something you consume. But as a baker, do you have any tips, tricks, opinions for baking at home sourdough? My friend recently gave me a 3-year-old starter, and my husband and kids are eager for me to get baking with it. So I do. Yes, I do not eat sourdough anymore. I have celiac disease, which means I cannot imbibe in the old gluten and any wheat flours, and I have not delved into the world of gluten-free sourdough. There's actually tons of resources out there for it now. I just don't eat enough bread anymore to do it. I mean, here's my thing with sourdough. I was like leading the charge on the sourdough boom that happened during the pandemic when everyone was sourdough crazy. I was living my best sourdough life. What's kind of funny is I got diagnosed with celiac right after, like right in the midst. And I'm like, oh, that's why I never felt good during this. But that being said, so I have a website / cookbook recommendation for you that is what helped me have so much success with the sourdough. But the thing with sourdough is you have to feed it. You do have to take care of it. It's like a pet. And for me, I don't make enough bread anymore for me to try the gluten-free. Someday maybe if I just start giving away, I'm just like, we don't eat enough bread for it. But I always see the recipes and I'm like, oh, that looks so delightful. Anyways, so for my fellow gluten-freeers, there are tons of resources out there. I actually am going to add the gluten-free resources too. I have a couple cookbooks that do it, and it's just been a matter of me feeling like we could utilize it enough, but I'll include those. So I know I have some fellow gluten-free people here, so I'll include that for you. And if there are any other gluten-free people out there who've done successful gluten-free sourdough, let me know, because I would be so curious about what resources you use and how it turned out for you. I've struggled a little bit with some of my gluten-free bread, just not rising. But anyways, back to good old regular sourdough. So my absolute favorite is The Clever Carrot. This food blogger has 2 cookbooks, and one of them is called Artisan Sourdough Made Simple. And I got that cookbook during the pandemic, and it turned everything around for me. It was the most successful I'd ever been with sourdough. My loaves were beautiful. I found it really easy to take care of. Her recipes are just like the title says, made simple. They're simple, like they are really achievable. And she has all kinds of delicious things. I mean, I think we made a sourdough brioche loaf. We made this beautiful, like, one that had dark chocolate chunks in it. It was like this beautiful loaf. Oh my goodness. We made bagels. She has bagels in there, and we used to make those all the time. My kids, whenever we had guests, I would make the sourdough bagels. So that's really, really the best and my most favorite resource I can share with you. She also makes a banana bread using, so when you feed your sourdough, what happens is you throw some away. So you're always discarding some sourdough, and it's kind of sad to just like throw it away. So she has recipes that you can use for your discard, and one of them is this banana bread, and it was fantastic. So anyways, I will include that for you, and I think it will get you well on your way to sourdough success. I actually bought that cookbook for a bunch of my pals who are also getting into sourdough because it was so good. And there's a ton of information just on her website as well. And I think even I think there's maybe even a video. But anyways, I'll link it below. But if you want to go find it yourself, it's theclevercarrot.com is the website. Artisan Sourdough Made Simple is the book. All right, next question. I'm a relatively new spinner and would like some recommendations on resources for learning long draw. I sort of get it, but would love to know yours or others' top resources, mainly for the wheel as I am awaiting my first support spindle in the post, but either would be good. So we just kicked off our 100 days of long draw on April 1st, and yes, my favorite resource, if you can find somebody locally, highly recommend. I am very, very lucky that my friend Mel taught me how to do long draw at my local fiber shop, Port Fiber. And that was fantastic. It's really, really great to be able to pick that up in person if you can. So if you can learn locally from somebody, that's super helpful. Because they can watch you, they can help you troubleshoot if you're having issues. But if you don't have anywhere that you can go to take a class, then my favorite online resource is I took JC Boggs. They are the founder of Ply Magazine. They have a class on Craftsy called Worsted to Woolen. And it is fantastic. What I love about that class is if you do already know how to spin worsted, then you start with what you know. And you slowly do these little steps to all of a sudden by the end, you're doing long draw. And so I love that as a resource. There's also Ply Magazine has an issue all about woolen spinning. So that has a lot of great tips in it. So that class, besides the one I took in person, I think were the most helpful resources for me. And then there's little tips that I was just trying to think if I could share any, but I don't know that they're only going to make sense depending on where you're at in your spinning journey. But yeah, I really, really liked that class and recommend it as a resource. And it is for the wheel, but I think you could apply. It is more centered on the wheel. I'm trying to think if you could apply it to the spindle. The thing I love about support spindles is I had spun quite a bit of long draw on my wheel prior to learning spindle spinning, but I feel like I've honed in my long draw and supported long draw because of my spindles, because spindles naturally have a stop-start motion because you are flicking with your hand. And so there's this kind of flick of the hand and draw out and then wind on your cup and go again. Where when you're on a wheel, the nice thing is, it is fast because you're just sitting there and it winds itself on and you just keep, it's just more of this motion. So it's quite speedy. But yeah, anyways, I hope you give it a try. If anybody else has tips on how they learned long draw, resources that they loved, we would love to have you share them below. There is a book I have. It is like a yarn design book that also has tons of information. Let me see if I can remember the name of it quick. Aha! The Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs. Let me pull up the. Oop. Nah, I don't want to see that. Okay, by Sarah Anderson, and Judith McKenzie does the foreword. But so Sarah Anderson is the author, and that's fantastic. If you are curious about all the different yarns you could spin, I highly recommend that book. That was one of the first that I added to my spinning library when I started spinning. So there you go. I hope those help. All right, last question. Hi, Andrea. I love your Traveler line and have purchased multiple patterns in it, but for the life of me, I can't get into that pattern texture rhythm. I don't understand it. I'm not a new knitter. I've knit many of your patterns. They're written so clearly. Well, thank you. And the techniques are simple. Why am I struggling with it? I can't read the bumps for some reason, and it's not until I'm a few rows out that I see that I did too many stockinette rows. I use a row counter, have a pattern holder to help me read the correct row, etc. I feel like I'm doing all the things to help myself, yet still coming up short. You know what it is? It's because it breaks our normal rhythm. So often when we're knitting, a lot of our stuff is 1 by 1 or 2 by 2. So if we're knitting stockinette, we're used to like knit a row, purl a row, knit a row, purl a row, or knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. So they're these really balanced, even numbered kind of pattern repeats. The Traveler series is not. It's a 5 row, which is fine if you're working in the round for the most part, but working flat, it can throw you. If you look at the patterns, depending on which one you're writing, I actually have to sometimes write out like 10 to 20 rows of the pattern because it changes. So I did grab my little Traveler cowl so I could show you my favorite way to keep track. It's actually on the wrong side. So if you look on the wrong side, I just count my purl bumps. 1, 2, 3, and I know I've done enough. And then you can check it on the other side. You should have, whoop, get me out of there. You should have 2 purl bumps. 1, 2, on the wrong side, 3. That's when I get to lose my row counter, not have to worry about all that. It's by keeping track mainly of those 3 on the back. So try that. I think that might help you because it's really easy to, I think, get confused when you're trying to read the stockinette, but the purl bumps, even when they're on the needle, like you will clearly be able to go, come on, focus, focus. There it is. I'm gonna sorry, this is kind of hard to do from a distance. All right. I can't see. There we go. So, you know what I'm going to do is I'm even going to put my little needle through it so that you can see. Ta-da! There, see them? 3. Try that. See if that helps. Should add this to my outfit because it is a little chilly-nilly. All right. Wow, first half of that episode all about pilling. So we do, as we just chatted about, we have the 100 days of long draw going. We also have 100 days of knitting. So we also started that on April 1st, and I've seen so many fun little spin-offs that people are doing of it too. Like one of my friends is doing, for their 15 minutes a day, they're doing a walk and knit. So they're getting outside and walking for their 15 minutes of knitting. So I've loved that. I actually did a little walk in it the other day, but it's just little moments to carve out for yourself to either make time for something that's important that fills your bucket, or to practice a new skill like long draw. So anyways, we're having a lot of fun with those. We would love to have you join. It's primarily on like Instagram, just using that hashtag, and I'll have those below. But I also did open up some Ravelry forums. So if you want to chat about it, my Ravelry group is linked below right to the forums. And of course we have the 2 Knitalongs going on. The DRK March to May Knitalong goes on through May 31st. And then we have the DRK Spin It to Knit It Knitalong, which is for the Traveler series. And besides that, I don't have any show and tell that I can show you, but I did finish up the pattern for the May Knitalong Challenge and 2024's Right Back Sweater. So excited about both of them. Can't wait to share them with you. I also have a new pattern coming out next week. I almost forgot to say it. I have a new pattern coming out next week, I believe on Tuesday. That is a classic wardrobe staple that is super cozy. I actually had it on before I started this video, but I was like, I can't wear it until next week. So I'm excited to share that with you. I recommend signing up for my newsletter because you'll get a special little discount. And I'm actually releasing it with the Farmer's Daughter Fibers. I got to use some of their amazing yarn, and we are doing a really fun little Q&A in their newsletter. So I also recommend signing up for the Farmer's Daughter Fibers newsletter. Okay. Besides that, I think that is everything. I have been long drawing my little heart out. There was a learning curve. I hadn't done it at my wheel for a long time. And I had a moment of frustration where my fiber kept breaking. I was like, oh, but thankfully, my friend reminded me of all the things, what size roll to use to cross tension the hooks. That is a great tip. I'll just share it quickly. If you are doing long draw and you are struggling, try winding the yarn so that you kind of use think like tying a shoe, where it's going to go, you're going to go on the hook you want to feed on, but then go across and hook it over there and then go down. And that cross tensioning of your hooks helps significantly. Like ever since I did that, it's just been easy breezy. And I ended up doing a pretty decent sample. And now today I'm starting my proper spin now that I've got it to the thickness I want it and to the twist I want it. So I'm really excited. But it's on my wheel downstairs. So it's a little hard to show you my spindle updates that I was doing with the last challenge. But as I finish skeins and everything, I'll show you. And I've still got 2 support spindle projects that I'm working on. I think I already showed you this one. This one, I am 2/3 of the way through. Hold on. Shouldn't be so hard. Okay. So here we go. These are using sticklebats from Inglenook Fibers, and they are spun on my Mingo Asho support spindles, which are these really stunning spindles that have a blown glass bottom. There, no, it wanted to focus. Focus. Look at that. Ooh la la. And then these beautiful wooden shafts, and there's always some little like wood burning at the base there. So I actually finished up the second, so I'm doing a 3-ply. So I finished spinning the singles for the second ply last night. So I only have one more ply to go, which is this whole bag. That is, so this is the, if you want to see what the fiber looks like, pre-spun. So I'm working away on that. And then I also have a sweaters quantity that I am doing. This is with a sheep called Miss Jackson from Melly Knits. I feel like it's a Corey. Darn, I'm not going to remember. But anyways, I've got this going on some Spanish peacock spindles, another one of my favorite because they're so beautiful. So I'm still working away on those, but I'll tell you what, it's been knit city here. I have just been knitting. And as I've been knitting, I've come up with a bunch of new ideas. So now I'm like, man, I really want to sew. I really want to spin. But I have all these ideas and I got to cast them all on and knit all the things. So it's busy. So I'm going to go get to it. I hope that you have a lovely weekend. I hope you get a chance to make something, and I hope to see you back here next week. Bye.